Hey there, this is Steven, aka Waka, and I'm coming to you with my thoughts on MSI Day One. I'm going to be doing these throughout MSI, unless I forget or am lazy and don't do one, in which case I will cover the day I don't do the next day. So, with that said, let's get into Day One. First matchup, T1 and Saigon Buffalo, formerly Fongbu Buffalo. This one, because T1 is basically the tournament favorite, it felt pretty obvious that they were favored to win this game. However, people who have followed Vietnam know that Fongbu Buffalo in the past have taken games off of really high-level opponents in international play. So I was open to the possibility of an upset, and in the first few minutes I thought we were going to get it. Early lane, Fongbu's laners coming out against Guma and put them in the ground early, created momentum for them that unfortunately didn't last very long. This game, even though Buffalo lost, ironically I feel like it did show the blueprint for how best to beat T1, which is creating chaos. I feel like a lot of the game was just T1 trying to maintain order and do things the way you expect a T1 lineup to do them, going for neutrals, increasing farm leads, really just letting their individual prowess push them toward mid and late game fights that they inevitably win. And I feel like Saigon Buffalo, their whole plan was chaos. It was just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And I feel like against teams like T1 and even RNG, I feel like that's the only way a lot of the emerging regions and even regions like EU and NA are going to have a real shot at beating them. What I really feel like did Saigon in, and what makes T1 such a scary opponent in the tournament, is how they played that first Baron. I think that a lot of teams in other regions, NA, have a really hard time with focusing neutrals, especially Baron, as well as knowing when to turn, when to fight. And I think T1 executed that Baron perfectly in a way that was so seamless and so easy looking that it should terrify people and fans of other regions. Also, side note, Froggy is a really fun screen name. That doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's just really funny to hear the casters saying the name Froggy. Game 2, we had DFM versus A's. And I was excited for this one because I haven't watched these teams at all this year. So this was one of the few games I genuinely had no frame of reference for. So I didn't know who was better. You know, obviously, historically, DFM, especially, last year they showed up. That region has been incrementally improving and gaining standing in the international community. But despite that, I think that there weren't a lot of expectations for either of these teams. These are DFM. I think I've heard most people agree that they are likely second seed, first round exit kind of team, kind of like NA. What made this game fun for me at first was the Samira pick. I love chaos in drafting. I think that drafting in NA especially has become so regimented that it makes me puke. And seeing them pull out picks that are higher risk and aren't seen as much was really interesting. Except that it sucked ass. It sucked ass when EG played it too, but Samira hasn't looked good from what I've seen. The problem with Samira is it's so easy to take advantage of range with Samira, and you saw it with DFM playing Lucian, who actually is an ADC that gets outranged by other options, but when you play Samira, Lucian becomes very easy to play, and considering Lucian was arguably the biggest ADC buff of the pre-MSI patch, I feel like setting yourself up to get gapped is not a good strat to win. But more than anything, the game just felt really boring. It felt like DFM was ahead pretty early, but they weren't good enough or efficient enough to close it out quickly. So what you ended up with was a game that was lost at 12 minutes being dragged to 25, even though it didn't need to be. And I'm going to say this as a blanket statement for every team that lost. It is day one, and I know it's easy to make judgments based on day one. And I think the main thing you get a measurement of on day one is the complexion of the team. I think that's why teams like T1 and G2 did really well, because they're teams that they have veteran presences, they have good organizational trees. They're teams that don't get flustered on bigger stages, whereas emerging regions and NA, you can tell they got younger players. They have less experience on these stages. For Vietnam, it's been like 2 years since they've played an international. So there are definitely butterflies to get out on day one. And my expectation is that these teams, especially teams like DFM and PSG, are going to play better once they've had some time to acclimate. Game 3, Order versus G2. The first thing, I love the drafting from Order. I'm going to say it throughout MSI. I basically root for any team that doesn't pick standard shit, because standard shit is fucking boring. And seeing Carthage Jungle for the first time, even though I have no doubt we're going to see that much, much more because it was buffed for MSI. Getting to see Yon was really cool. And I think, to his credit, sorry, I had to look up the name. Kissi did super well on the Yon, kind of. It's one of those matchups that's tricky, because if you look at the highlights from that game, you would think that he was kicking ass on that champion. But the reality was he was getting a lot of opposite side picks, a lot of 1v1s in lane, which is good. It just didn't do anything to actually push the team forward. And it's really sad to watch a game where one team is ahead by multiple kills and is getting solo kills, and it doesn't really impact your interpretation of how the game is going to play out at all. And that's mainly because G2 had the better macro, they had the better map control, they had CS advantages, even in lanes where they were getting solo killed. It's tough. Even if you've got fingers, even if you're a player from an emerging region who has innate mechanical skill, the way that more experienced teams and more talented teams play the map and understand game states and understand objective control is always going to be. And I think a lot like the T1 game, where this all really came to a head, was at the Baron, because again, Order goes for an early Baron take after they win a team fight, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, especially if you feel like you're behind and the other team has tempo and map advantage. Problem was, it didn't work. And it didn't work for the same reason that T1 was able to so effectively take Baron in their game, which was just controlling the zone. Inversed. So where T1 was able to control the Baron zone to such an extent that it made an approach look impossible, Order did not have that kind of control, which set up G2, and specifically Caps, to do what they do best, which is fuck up the thing you're trying to do. And once that play blew up, I think obviously you're never going to surrender a game, especially at MSI, but that's about as over as the game's going to get. But again, like I said about other emerging teams, I think Order is going to pick it up throughout the next few days. I think that they definitely have more to offer than they showed, and G2 looked really scary today. What I'm curious to see is if G2 descends as the other regions ascend, or if what we're seeing is just a very clear picture of a top 3. We'll have to see. And by have to see, I mean have to wait until the next game, because game 4 was G2 versus EG, and EG looked even worse than Order did. And that shit's annoying. And here's the thing. When I say EG looked worse than Order, I don't think EG is worse than Order. And this isn't me being an NA fan. This is me being someone who has watched international tournaments for years. And NA teams just tend to come out cold. And, Jat pointed this out on the analyst desk, but I wouldn't be surprised if EG loses to G2 again tomorrow. I also wouldn't be surprised if EG ends up going even in the group because they beat G2 on the second half. I think right now, what you're seeing is a windfall from a super hype end to their spring split. And I think that the expectations that were put on them were impossible. I don't think EG was ever going to do as well as NA fans wanted them to do. However, I still think that EG does have the tools to both win the group and take games off of the main contenders to win the title this year. And I think that because EG does what teams like Saigon Buffalo were trying to do, but better, which is introduce chaos. The problem with this game against G2 is they did the thing I feared most, which is they got safe. Every year, NA teams, TL, TSM, CLG, 100 Thieves, it doesn't matter which one. They all do the same thing. Whatever style that they use to get to international play, it just gets boiled down into let's play generic safe shit because all our players are too scared to take risks because they have allowed the media and the narratives to soak into their brain. I would rather watch EG lose every game on interesting picks and picks meant to give their carries a chance to succeed. What I don't want to see is JoJo on Rise every game. And I know Rise is a champion that he has played before and has success on. Rise is also the most generic champion in the game. He just is. He's almost the mascot of the game. And the fact that Caps was so aware of his champion tendencies that they had a counter pick planned for it, I really hope that this is not the pattern that is set for the rest of the tournament for G2. Otherwise, this is going to just get uglier. Also, I gotta say, the casting in this game was funny and sad. I love EU and NA's relationship. I really do, even though we are on the negative end of it almost all the time. I still think it's really fun. I think it's kind of a sibling rivalry almost. The problem is, early in the game, you have the EU casters who are trying to rib NA, and they're kind of they're talking shit, we're having fun, and then you get to about 18 minutes and you can just tell that Vedius feels bad now, which is even worse. I would rather them be mean than pity us, because that's what it went from haha, you're gonna lose, and then Vedius turns and now he's like, you guys are really trying your best, you guys are really, I saw it was a good effort. Stop that, because pity feels worse. Also, just a few more notes on the G2 EG game. 1, NA teams, stop contesting Rift Heralds. Clearly we suck at it. Stop trying. It seems like every time an NA team gets it in their head they want to take an early Rift Herald, we end up with 1 or 2 deaths and losing the Rift Herald. And the way we lost that Rift Herald was even worse, because it was that close. They almost repelled them, and if G2 doesn't get that Rift Eye, if that's just a trade and you push them off Rift Herald, that's a good momentum builder. But the fact that they sneak back in and get the Herald anyway after that fight made the whole thing fucking pointless. Also, for G2, the roaming and map presence are horrifying. Watching the Pyke roam for First Blood and then the Anivia roam later to get the 2v1 on Aatrox, you just watch it and it looks so easy. It looks so simple. As a fan, you're like, of course, roam. Gank them. What makes it so mystifying is that G2 has the presence of mind amidst the 3, 5, 10 other processes going through on the game. You're counting objective timers, you're following wave patterns, you're following when you need to group, you're following cooldowns. And on top of all that, Caps has the presence of mind to just go, hey guys, I'll be back in 40 seconds. I'm gonna go help kill Aatrox. And it goes off without a hitch. And that shit is scary, because that's not finger skill, that's not mechanics, that's game knowledge. That's Caps knowing the game better. And that is the scariest thing that a player can bring. Also, through 2 games, I am not sure if Samira is just fucking awful or if people are playing it that don't know how to use it. Because in both games, what it looked like was a melee range ADC that didn't get to contribute any damage because it requires an engage. And once you're behind, Samira just becomes an ADC that plays like fucking Katarina, which is not helpful if she just goes in to die or can't go in at all because she knows she's going to die. One last thing about that game. I know I've said way more about this game than any of the other ones, but seriously, don't juggle Baron if the other team has an Anivia up. What? EG trying to fucking half and half that Baron while G2 is still there and Anivia is just walking up and poking them with ult? Of course you're going to lose that fight. Anivia is designed to fight there. You can't be pussies about it. You gotta fight them, or you gotta let them do Baron and try to engage after. But trying to juggle Baron against Anivia is stupid, and they should have known that. Then we got Game 4, which was RNG versus Istanbul Wildcats, and this was by far the saddest game of the day. This one was sad, not because Istanbul looked horrible, but because it didn't matter how they looked. The way RNG dominated every phase of that game, I mean everything. Every lane was up by double-digit CS in the first 12 minutes. With no kills. That's just farming. They had complete objective control. Every team fight they went for, they won. Except for one. Istanbul did get one fight up top lane on a turnaround and get a couple kills. Yay, but honestly, this game had almost nothing to do with Wildcats and everything to do with RNG. RNG is so scary. You genuinely learn nothing from this game because you don't even know how they would play in non-ideal conditions because the conditions in this game were never anything but ideal for them. So all we know so far is that RNG is scary, horrifying, monstrous, and I hope to God that a weakness comes out as these games continue. And then Game 5, we had PSG Talon versus Red Canids, and I was fucking hyped for this game. I think Red Canids and CBLOL are they're like my favorite non-NA region because in the spectrum of regions who get shit-talked, Latin America is the only one, I think, who competes with NA. And even then, not anymore. I got into LCS around Season 6, and back then, like, everyone remembers the Brazilian memes. Like, the joke was that Brazil has the worst players in the world. Like, their solo queue's terrible. They were known as the worst region. But every year when you'd watch them internationally, yeah, they lose, but they get a little closer. They were it was almost the same as watching DFG, but at a slower pace. And I think this Red Canids performance is the most dominant performance I have ever seen from a CBLOL team in any international play. Not best, I mean dominant, because this wasn't a game. Red Canids kicked the shit out of PSG Talon. I know I said the RNG game was the most one-sided, because it was. But this one was trickier because whereas with the RNG game, it was clearly just RNG being great and Istanbul not. This game, I actually couldn't tell throughout the first probably 15 minutes if Red Canids was playing well or if PSG had just been replaced by sentient buckets of paint. I don't know what the hell PSG Talon was doing, but I mean, if you need someone to stand at mid tower and last hit minions, shit, I can do that. Specifically, that team fight mid around 16 minutes looked so good from Canid's side in terms of the engage, but at the same time, that was at a point where the game already felt like it was kind of out of hand, like PSG was already dead on arrival, and that just kind of was an exclamation point. So I'm really curious to see if Red Canids is just a different breed this year and we get a true second contender, or if this was just PSG Talon coming out slow and things equalize between the other teams in that group as the week goes on. So overall, I thought MSI Day One was a lot of fun. You could tell some of the teams were colder on arrival than others. I think Day One especially is where you see a lot of the experience gap come in. I think teams like T1 and G2 and RNG, which have established players, which, you know, at the risk of sounding sort of mean to the other regions, they came in like they weren't surprised they were there. Those teams came in like winners who are used to winning, whereas the other teams, including EG, came out like they were kind of timid, like the lights were too bright, like the noise was too loud, like they just were not comfortable being on that stage. And hopefully that changes, because it's going to be a bummer if we get 3 good teams and a swath of garbage, which I don't think is going to be the case. I think there were some interesting teams coming out. I think Red Cannons was really good, surprisingly, better than expectations. I think EG will play better. I don't think this one game is indicative of EG's potential. I think they're definitely going to come out and hit a little harder. And I think the same thing with Istanbul. I think the Turkish region has been better than this normally, and I feel like it's kind of unfair that they got matched with RNG Day One. I think that when they get some games under their belt against some less intimidating performances, you're going to start to see their personality as a region and as a team come out. So overall, I'm curious to see what happens in the coming days. Tomorrow's going to be interesting because EG obviously starts the day with the double header, and if EG wins both those games, they will shoot up to first in the group. So we'll have to see if they can pull that off. If they lose against G2 and then win against Order, I feel like that might set up what everyone assumed anyway, which is going to be G2 winning, EG second, Order third. But I'll be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if EG lost both. I also wouldn't be surprised if they won both. I think EG is a team that goes so much on energy and so much on momentum that if they can get it going early against G2 tomorrow, I think they could really roll that momentum into 2 wins the same way G2 did today. And I'm also really curious just to see how the doubleheader aspect affects the teams in that group. Initially, I assumed that it would be a benefit. It would be nice to have a warm-up game, especially if the warm-up game is against Order, and then you go into the marquee matchup. But we'll have to see. But I'm having fun with it. I hope you guys are having fun with it, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.